Okay, so for those of you who are watching the recording, I'm just going to go ahead and do a quick video showing you how to do a proper air squat. So we're going to start, I always like to start individuals with their feet, and then we just kind of work our way up with the different joints of what each joint should be doing, and ending with the upper body and what the upper body should be doing. So this is just called an air squat, or some people call it a body weight squat. But you can take what I teach you right now, and it will translate into any other form, whether it's like a dumbbell squat or a goblet squat or a back squat. Like your foundation, which is your legs and your hips and your knee movement, like all of that is going to stay pretty much the same. So let's start with our feet. And so what you're going to do is, hopefully I can get my feet in here. Okay. So you're going to start with your feet about shoulder width apart, okay? So this is going to give us plenty of room for our knees to track over our toes and our hips to go down. If you go too narrow, then we end up being very, very knee dominant. A lot of us don't have good ankle flexibility. And so if we're too narrow, like we can't go very far, right? And we can't get our knees out to get down very far. So ideally we want to be shoulder width apart. Toes, depending on your flexibility, your toes will either go straight or they'll be turned out slightly. There is no right or wrong. It's whatever you're comfortable with. I like toes out. So when your toes go out, this is where your knees also should go. You want your knees, you don't want your knees to cave in. You don't want them to be really wide, because now it's pulled my feet up off the ground. I don't have solid contact. So my knees are just going to be right in alignment with my toes. So that way, as I squat, my feet are still firmly planted on the floor, and there's not an excessive inward or outward position, okay? So toes should remain in contact. Lauren just jumped on. Hi, Lauren. So I'm recording this. You're the only one who's on, so I was just going to record just so people can come on. So you can just listen if you want, or if you have questions. So you want your toes to always be firmly placed on the ground. You don't want your toes to come up. We don't want any wiggling toes. We don't want our heels to ever come up. You want your feet always flat on the ground as you squat. So with our toes and our feet in position, we're going to make sure that our knees are tracking over our toes. I'm going to give you a side view. And as you go down, you're going to send your hips back slightly. You're kind of unlocking your hips. And then you're going to just send your hips down. And you're just going to come as low as you can. I don't have the greatest ankle flexibility, so I can't get super low. But this is about as low as I can get. And that's okay. You may only be able to get right here, and that's totally fine. It could be because maybe you don't have great ankle flexibility. It could be because you don't have great hip mobility, and that's just something that you can improve upon over time. So we covered our feet, we covered our knees, the hips. We don't want to do an excessive bend over. I don't want my chest parallel to the ground. I want it up, and try to get it as up as high as you can. I tell some people to stick their arms up, so that way it kind of forces them to keep their chest up, because we don't want that bent over position. So this is not a squat. A lot of times if there's new individuals who are new to squatting, they do just a lot of bending over. That's not a proper squat. We don't want to just hinge at the hip. That's more like a deadlift, okay? So we want to just send our hips straight down. So from the front view, arms up, toes slightly out, knees are going to track over, and we're just going to try to send our hips in between our knees, getting a wide stance. So you can see my knees are pretty wide, but they're over my toes, and my chest is up. This is as high as I can get it, okay? So again, feet stay in contact. You can either have your toes, your feet going forward or slightly out. You want your feet shoulder width apart. Some people say hip to shoulder width. Again, it really depends on your flexibility, but I like to go shoulder width apart. And then once you're ready to start your squat, you just unlock your hips just slightly and then send your hips down. And that's it. And then you stand right back up. So it's very, very, once you get the hang of it and get the hang of the movement, it's very simple. You can practice doing squats when you go to use the restroom. I mean, there's something there to catch you. And you're just gonna squat to it. And then you can, it's just practice. Like you might as well practice, right? You're there anyways, you can practice. For some individuals who are not comfortable going low, or they're not sure if they go low, if they're going to be able to get out of their squat, you can squat to a chair. So if you have a dining room chair, an office chair, maybe make sure it doesn't roll out from under you, a bench or a box, squat to that. And that way you can practice going lower and lower and lower each time. So if you don't have anything, use your sofa. That works too. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. Lauren, do you have any questions? I just caught you as you like shoved it in your mouth.
You used to be a waitress.
I was saying I was a waitress at one time, so.
Me too. No, I like that. I really like that summer when you were practicing like up against the wall.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was genius, and that's something I actually teach my clients when they struggle with like leaning forward too much. Yeah. Is like practicing up against the wall so they can't like they'll just bonk their head on the wall if they lean forward.
Yeah.
So I like that tip.
So I did that last year, and then there was a post that came out earlier this year from Squat University. Do you follow them? Yeah. So Squat University has some great posts. He is not really a fan of that. And when he explained why, I was kind of like, oh, it makes sense. There's really nothing wrong with a forward chest. It kind of depends. Every body is going to be different because of where our center of gravity is. So you and I are built differently. So you might be able to have more of an upright position depending on where your center of gravity is. My center of gravity might be a little bit lower or than yours. So I might have to adjust differently than you. So when he was saying about the squat therapy, which is where you face the wall and then you try to go down, it is not always good for everyone because some people may need to lean forward more for their balance sake. So there was something else.
Makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. There are some individuals though who are super flexible and they can just get down. They can toes right up against the wall and go straight down. So it's actually, to me, it's a great tool to use for trying to figure out where you're tight, because that will tell on you. For me, if I do squat therapy, it shows me that my calves and my shins are super tight because both of those areas will start to cramp up. So I know that those areas need to be worked. Some people feel it in their mid-spine, meaning that they don't have a whole lot of flexibility in their thoracic. So it can be beneficial, but it's not something that's used to force people in an upright position, I guess is what he was trying to say. So,
okay.
But, is there anything else that you find your clients struggling with when it comes to squats?
No, but I recently found that I was doing squats incorrectly because I started using Alex LeChant's training for my gymnastic stuff, but I wanted to add some legs because I just felt like I was neglecting my legs. And she gave me some really good, when you go heavier, not to, like, I was sitting back in my hips like way too much and like dropping down into my hip pockets more than I should and keeping my weight primarily in my heels. And she's like, you really want it to like plant your whole foot and feel it in all four corners and like press the ground away from you and like not sit, like you're still gonna stick your butt out, but not like as extremely as I was. And so that was something that I learned that I was doing wrong recently, and making sure that when you brace your core, you're actually like pushing air out. Like it doesn't look cute. Like you're like this, you're like, and bracing as big as you can make it, as opposed to like pulling in.
Right.
And that was interesting to me too.
Yeah. So the weight in the feet, yes, you want them distributed. Some people say, you know, 4 points. Some people say 3 points. So one in the heel, and then the balls of your feet, like 2 points. So you always want like 3 to 4 points of contact. And the weight should be like in your midfoot. I love the cue of pushing the floor away, because
that was really helpful.
Full foot. That was, I use that cue for deadlifting too, to push the floor.
Something that I saw at Squat University was like trying to part the floor, like tear the floor apart in between you. And I'm like, I'm gonna have to try that next time, and I just saw that like today or yesterday. Yeah. Like ripping the floor apart between your legs. I thought, that's interesting.
So that will actually help too, to keep your knees driving out over your toes versus being more in like a relaxed position. So when you pull the floor away, you can see I'm automatically engaging my quads. I'm not trying to. The movement is coming from my feet, but this engages, which then puts me into a good foundation to squat. The bracing, one of my weightlifting coaches, he put it this way. He said, brace like you have to take a poop, but don't poop. And it was like, I was like, oh, that makes so much more sense, because a lot of people, they think bracing is like sucking in air and then like tightening their abs. And it's really not. It's like it's like you have to fill this section out. And it's not pretty. It's not a flattering look, but it's the proper way to protect your spine as you're squatting.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that was a game changer for me too, because I was like, I don't know if I can, like you were saying, like I was doing this, I was bracing, I was holding in, but really what you want to do is that. And it looks like, I mean, Mondo belly,
right, basically, like
that's what you want.
Try to make yourself look as bloated as possible.
Right, exactly. And so if you see those like Insta people that are like super skinny, like, so I'm like, no, you're gonna hurt yourself, babe. It's okay. Like, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that. So yeah, no, that's good. That's good that you learned that, because that is our natural weightlifting belt. Like, if you don't know how to squat without a weightlifting belt, then there's no point in you using a weightlifting belt. Like, don't use a weightlifting belt until you learn how to brace properly, because otherwise it's kind of like you're using it more as a crutch than anything.
Did you talk about, I heard you say knees over toes, but I know I came on a little bit late. Did you talk about the importance of that, or why? Because that's something that we learn, you hear that so much, like, don't put your knees over your toes. Like, I learned that for the longest time. And then I was like, oh wait. And then when I learned from like knees over toes guy.
Yeah. So knees over toes. So yeah, a lot of times when we squat, oh, don't let your knees go over your toes. Well, if you think about it, whenever we walk upstairs or go downstairs, our knees go over our toes. There are many times throughout our day where our knees go over our toes. If you've ever seen a baby squat, a baby has a perfect squat, their knees are over their toes. And there's nothing wrong with your knees going over your toes. It's when you don't have good flexibility or mobility in your ankles that it can become a problem, and it puts a lot of pressure on your knees. So when you see someone squat and then their heels start to come up, this is where it can get all bad, is when your heels lift off the ground, because then it puts a lot more pressure on the front of your knees. So when you squat, you want to make sure that your heels are always in contact with the ground, and it's okay if your knees go past your toes. You're engaging your quad muscles. When your knees go over your toes, your quads are now engaged, versus when we deadlift, our knees never go over our toes. They're not supposed to. That's how we can target our hamstrings. It becomes more of a hinge. So when we deadlift, our knees aren't over our toes, so we're engaging these muscles. But when we squat and our knees go over our toes, we engage these muscles. So Lauren might have some other great information about that, because she did like some physical therapy type things when she was having some knee issues. And it's the guy's name, well, his Instagram is knees over toes guy. Is that what it is?
Knees over toes guy. Yeah, he's Ben Patrick, and I did his program. He's really, really good. But yeah, if you're watching this back and you have any questions about that, let me know, because I use a lot of his methods in my exercise therapy stuff, like helping people bulletproof their joints and stuff. Good stuff.
Yeah, I've been doing some of his work just off of YouTube, like that he puts out for free, and I notice a huge difference just doing that little stuff that he puts out. Makes a huge difference with me.
He gives away a lot of awesome content for free.
Yeah. Isla, I see you're on here. Did you have any squatting questions? If you do, you can put it in the chat box if you have any questions.
Not so much squatting, but lunges.
Oh.
When I do lunges, sometimes, especially when you do the backwards or something, doing the backwards lunge, my knee hurts.
But it doesn't hurt when you're doing a front lunge?
No.
Okay. All right, so for a lunge, there really shouldn't be much of a difference between a back and a front, but I'm going to show you a reverse. So I'll show you the reverse lunge. So for the reverse lunge, you want to make sure it's kind of the same concept with your feet, where you don't want your heels to come up off the ground. So as I come back, okay, the further back you go, right, it's less that you have to travel. Here can be kind of awkward. The more narrow you are, the harder it is on your ankle and knees. So you want to make sure when you step back, it's far enough back to where as you come down, you're not putting a whole lot of stress on your knee, and that your heel is still able to come and stay in contact with the floor. Your shin can be either vertical or it can be slightly over your toe. It's okay. Either here or here is fine. Again, as long as your heel doesn't come up. Your back leg, you can either gently come down and do full range of motion and touch the ground gently, or you can just come down as far as you can and then come back up. Step forward, switch, make sure you have good balance, come down and up. Another thing that people do when they do a lunge is they pretend like they're walking on a tightrope. They go like one foot in front of the other and they lose their balance. So even if you're doing a reverse lunge, you don't want to be on a tightrope. You want to be slightly out. Okay, so you can still see my rear foot, you can still see my front foot. I'm more balanced this way. Here, here. So Isla, if it's the front of your knee that's bothering you, it could be because maybe you're too narrow. Maybe you need to take a bigger step back, give yourself some room, and come down.
It's the outside of my knee.
Oh, it's the outside of your knee.
Yeah. It's like when you're doing the reverse lunge, and then going down. I don't know. I don't know if maybe I'm not straight enough or what I'm doing, because I can't really see. I'm just doing them. So then I just prefer to do the forward lunge, but then they correct me. They're like, no, you were doing the backward lunge. And I'm like, I know what we're doing, but this feels more comfortable for me.
Interesting. My guess would be a tight IT band. So the muscle that runs down here,
right,
could be tight. If you could, maybe record yourself like at a side view lunging, and then you can send it to me.
Okay, I'll try that.
I can try and like pinpoint like maybe what it is. It could just be tight muscles, but it's weird that it's only in reverse and not forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, send me send me some videos of some different angles, side and front, and then we'll see if we can figure that out.
Okay.
That's a good question though. Do you have anything else to add to that, Lauren, that I might have forgotten? Because I know I'm going to get off this call and be like, oh, I should have said that.
No, I was actually going to say that what she was doing, like just doing the front lunges instead of backward stepping lunges, if that hurts, like that's a good modification. If they correct you, like just tell them my coach said that this is a good modification. Yeah. Because there's no benefit to stepping back into a lunge versus stepping forward into a lunge. And I think that it's probably has to do with, like Sam was saying, your foot placement. Because when you're stepping back, you can't see where you're stepping versus like you see how far you're stepping and where you're planting your foot when you step forward. And it could also be when you step back, you're landing on your toe versus when you step forward, you're landing on your whole foot. And so it could have to do with like the way you're landing when you have your foot planted as well. Yeah, those are just my thoughts. But yeah, the front stepping is a good modification, and just tell them modifying backward stepping lunges with frontward stepping lunges. Yes. But also you don't have to, you can narrow squats are also a modification for lunging if lunging hurts. But you said the front stepping lunges don't hurt your knee, so.
Yeah. Or doing step ups. Step ups is a good like modification for lunging too. If you have like stairs.
And split squats.
Squats too.
Split squats are a really good one, and they feel good. They're in Ben Patrick's knee ability stuff.
So split squat.
Do you know what a split squat is? Yeah.
The split squat is where you're here. Everyone's different on how far they go, but you're coming down, but you can also either come down forward into like a deep lunge, or you can just send your body straight down. So it just depends on what muscle you're trying to target. So here is going to target more of your quad. Here is going to target more of your glutes and hamstrings. So it depends on what your goal is for the day. But you can try that.
You can elevate your front leg too. Oh, sorry, I mean interrupt you.
No, you're fine. You can elevate your front leg. Gosh, there's so many different ways to modify like the movements. Yeah, so send me a video, Isla, and then maybe you can play with like a split lunge or just do the front lunges and call it good, because there's nothing wrong with front lunges for modification for reverse. So, any other questions before we wrap up? No. I think I know I'm probably gonna be like, oh, I forgot something, but that's the gist of it. I didn't want to get too in depth with everything, but that's the gist of it. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask your coach, or you can reach out to me if you have any questions. But I'm gonna take a picture really quick of you ladies. Forget. I'm all as Lauren goes away. All right, 1, 2, 3. Thank you. All right, ladies, thanks for hopping on. And I will see you ladies on Marco Polo. Have a great week. Bye.